Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. On today's episode, I have an interview with Michael Omartian. Michael produced and played piano on some of my favorite records that I've talked about on this channel. For example, he played the piano on Ricky Don't Lose That Number by Steely Dan. He played on many Steely Dan songs, including Asia. And I finally get some answers on what actually happened during that session. He also produced the Christopher Cross record with Ride Like the Wind and Sailing, and we talk about the guitar solo level and all these fun things. This is actually one of the most interesting interviews I've done. Check it out. Here's my interview. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I'm honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you.
Thank you.
One of the first things I want to ask you about is your background.
Okay.
Now you produced many records that I have known for years. One of them I made a video of, the Christopher Cross record.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to your background as a jazz musician, right? Essentially.
Well, I mean, quasi. I mean, I was more of a jazz appreciator as a kid, as opposed to being able to facilitate that with my family. I kind of did some, but my thought process, I find that people who are really good at jazz, their brains are wired a certain way. Mm-hmm. Mine wasn't. But I loved jazz.
Okay, give me an example of things that you were...
Well, I love Oscar Peterson is he to me is the bridge between a very progressive jazz and more of a blues-based jazz. But his faculties, his hands, Art Tatum. Art Tatum sounds like two people playing at the same time.
Right.
It's uncanny.
Yeah.
So I liked Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. I liked the Modern Jazz Quartet. And I had tons of records. And I just sat and listened to them, knowing that in order to become like that, it would take a lot of work. And as a kid, I just appreciated it very much. But that was my background.
But you had classical piano lessons
Classical piano lessons for a while, but I had a piano teacher that had a ruler.
Okay.
And if I improvised, I would get rapped on the knuckle. And I would sit there and I'd be playing Mozart and I'd take off and she'd go, boom, we don't improvise. So that was the end of my classical training. I realized there was a dimension. It was funny because my aunt had a piano. I didn't have a piano at my house, so I'd walk over to my aunt's house. And she would call my mom, Sophie, and she said, Sophie, there's something going on with your kid that you need to know about. He said, he hears things and he can just sit and play what he hears. And of course, my mom didn't understand it. Nobody really understood it. So it really took for me to leave Illinois, Chicago, and come to LA to develop this, because that had a lot to do with me getting into this business, was leaving Chicago, which had nothing.
And when was that? How old were you then?
Well, I was 20, I left Chicago in 67, which would have been 22 years old.
Okay.
I was born in 1945.
Yep.
And I knew that there was no way, I mean, there was just jingle. They were doing jingles in Chicago, and I had no interest in that. When the British invasion came, I wasn't the only one. A lot of people I knew that were married to other forms of music suddenly paid attention to this new wave of something.
Why? It just spoke to you?
Yeah, sonically it was different. I think maybe because of the voltage of the British voltage, something sounded different in what I heard. I was talking to you before the interview about how I really didn't pay much attention to the Beach Boys until one day I heard Good Vibrations, and I literally had to pull off the side of the road and go, what is this?
Right.
And so it was the first time I started paying attention to pop music. I didn't like doo-wop. Doo-wop was just, the C, A minor, D minor, G. It was just like too simple for me.
Yeah.
But when the Beatles came with the simple song like I Want to Hold Your Hand, I'm going, what would be appealing to someone who's got a certain type of musical taste liking that? And there was just something about it that I went, there's a sound here. And then the Stones, and then the Kinks, and then the Who, and all that. There was something that came from Britain, and I wasn't alone. A lot of people that I knew said, wow, what is this? So I think that captivated me, and I went, you know what? I started reading a lot of album credits, and I went, okay, you have Liverpool, you have New York, you've got Nashville, and you got LA. And I would look at the LA records, and I'd see Hal Blaine, Joe Osborne, a few names. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I don't know what I want to do. I really don't know. I don't know if I'm a songwriter or what, but I know I can't do it here. So I had $3,000 in my pocket, got on a plane, broke my mother's heart. She couldn't believe I was actually leaving home, and I did. And for 4 years, I just said, I'll do anything. I'll play on anybody's thing. I'll write a song with so-and-so, do boom, boom, this and that. Albert Hammond, who did It Never Rains in Southern California, I met him very early on. Bill Schnee, I met very early on. I ended up doing the arrangement of It Never Rains in Southern California because I met Albert. He said, I need someone to do strings and I need someone to play on it. And I said, well, let me do it. So I did.
And had you done stuff like that before?
Well, I did. I actually... It's interesting. When I was in high school, I would write for the symphony. We had a 210-piece symphony, and I went to Evanston Township High School. It was a very large orchestra. And I copied all the parts myself. And I remember sitting there and conducting. I remember my music teacher was infuriated that I was able to do that. And I was his enemy from that point on. I'm serious. He abused me from that point on. But I realized he was not digging the fact that I was able to do this. So I was doing stuff. It was immature. I mean, obviously you develop as time goes on, but I felt like I had a proclivity to orchestrating, playing, and so that kind of was the foundation. So when I got to LA, I struggled for 4 years. Like I said, I just did anything I could possibly do. And so then suddenly little breaks started taking place.
How much would sessions pay back then?
$110 for 3 hours.
Okay.
$95, $100.
Did it matter who you were playing with, on what session you were playing on?
Oh man, I tell you what, the first real session that I played on, I threw up all night the night before because I knew I was playing with Hal Blaine. Joe Osborne.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it because it was a friend of mine who, it's a kind of a funny story, but I had co-written a song with a guy who had a 3-song deal with Columbia. Okay. And he happened to have as his producer Bob Alcivar, who was the vocal arranger for the Fifth Dimension. And Jerry, his name was Jerry McLean, he told Al, I'd like to have, Bob Alcivar, he said, I'd like to have this guy Michael Omartian play on this session. Bob said, who? He said, well, it's the guy that wrote this song. He said, well, I like the song, but how do I know that the guy can play? He said, trust me. He said, I've got my own piano player. And at the time, it was Larry Knechtel. Who wouldn't want Larry Knechtel? He's one of the best. And Jerry said, I insist. And I don't know how he got it done, but he got it done. So I remember the night before, I'm playing with Hal Blaine and Joe Osborne. I was so nervous, man. And I remember I walked in shaking, sat down. We started with the song that I co-wrote. And it was so bizarre because it was almost like I thought I sucked. And Hal said, I want your phone number after the first take. They took me to the Musicians Union at 1 o'clock. It was a 10 to 1. It's with the Musicians Union, got me signed up with what was a answering service at the time. That's how they did it. You got a call.
Okay.
And I was booked solid from that moment on.
Wow.
So that was a 4 years for that. It took 4 years. And then that happened. And so that kind of launched that. But it was interesting because I think if you talk to any session musician, you get some curveballs thrown at you when you show up not knowing what you're about to do. And you're with an artist and you look at the thing and you go, okay. And I remember Lukather telling you about that thing with Lee Ritenour. I didn't have a second keyboard player sitting next to me. Would you take this part and play this, please?
Yeah.
But you would get into a situation where you go, man, you're sweating and you're shaking and you're going, am I going to be able to do this? And while everybody out is milling around, you're sitting there just working out the chords and stuff. But I consider that to be just great boot camp. I mean, it was just one of those kind of things. And one propelled into another,
Charts back then could be anything, right?
Yeah.
They could be single notes with chords, or it could be just simple chords with a stab here and there, be notated if something was an upbeat or something. And then you were expected to create your own parts.
Yes,
right?
That was the whole point.
That was the whole point.
That was the whole point of being a session musician. You were supposed to bring something to the table.
Would you listen to demos of songs, or was it strictly that you came in and you just read off a chart?
Well, a lot of times because it was cassettes at the time, and a lot of times nobody had, computers and stuff to put together a real demo.
Yep.
You'd have the artist come in with a guitar and sit there in the room and pick out the song.
Yep.
And you'd have a guitar player, a couple of guitar players, a keyboard player, a bass player, and a drummer, and you would have a chart. And a lot of times, I was asked on the session,
to
would
write
you
the
please
chart.
just transcribe what this person's doing?
Right.
And because of the time you were allotted, you didn't have time to really get detailed, so you just write out A chord, D major 7, whatever it was. And then you'd ramp it up, and the goal back then was 3 songs in 3 hours.
Okay.
So those were the early days
Yeah.
where you would just do it that way. Or if someone was a singer, I would get called to meet with the singer and the producer and hammer out a chart at another location before we actually went to the session. But it could get very sophisticated. I was telling you before about this one session that I did with a guy named Al Capps. Al called me 3 weeks in advance, and I show up to Capitol, and there's a orchestra risers all the way around a 9-foot piano, 9-foot grand sitting in the middle of the room, and I'm going, I'm the piano player. And I'm looking at her and going, I'm the piano player. Why is the piano sitting in the center of the room? Why is there a 65-piece orchestra surrounding the piano? And I walked into the room, man, and I look at the chart, and it's just pure notes, just nothing but notes. There's not a chord change. Mm-hmm. Now, as a session player, you relied on chord changes.
Yeah.
There wasn't any. And there were 12 songs sitting up on the music stand. All of a sudden, I started like this, and I walked, I said, Al, I said, what are we doing? He says, well, I'm doing a piano album. I said, you're doing a piano album? I said, for 3 weeks, you knew this was happening. How long did you I've had these charts for a long time. I said, well, why didn't you call me and get them to me so I can work it out? He says, do you recognize the titles? I said, yeah, I recognize the titles. He says, well, fake it. So I walked into the thing, I said, run the song, and I would sit there and I would write out every chord. I knew the song title, and I faked my way through the whole thing, and it worked out fine, but those are the kind of things that just go, oh. And it's not that I couldn't read, but that was asking way too much.
Right.
That's like asking a classical piano player to sit in front of an orchestra for the first time and look at
And sight read.
and Rachmaninoff. Here you go,
Yeah.
sight read it.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Right.
So anyway, so you would get everything, but for the most part, I think the majority would be like usually 2 staves. The top stave would have any really important melody lines. Bottom stave would be any important bass lines or drum hits, and then you'd have the chords sitting in the middle or up on top. And that's the way we did it.
So your ability to actually come up with not only the voicings, but the linear things that surround it. That's what, when I listen to Ricky Don't Lose That Number, I listened to it last night again. I've heard the song a million times. If you take the piano out, there's nothing left of the song.
Well, it is pianesque.
Yeah.
It is pianesque, yes.
All the fills and everything?
Yeah, and that none of that's planned. It's just a chord chart. I mean, I have it here, it's just a chord chart. The only thing that you have is, this, which is one of the coolest lines.
Amazing line.
And that they came up, that's just it.
Okay.
The raised 9 with the 6th and the 7th and all that, 3rd and all that stuff. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
Other than that, and then that, because Don likes to have a piano sometimes going along with the vocal. Mm-hmm. So that was important.
Would you play with clicks on these sessions very often?
No.
Almost never, right? How would people count off songs? Would they just...
Drummer
would just count it off and start playing.
Yeah.
What if there's a big space in a song with nothing going on? Would you just look at each other?
Well, no, we wouldn't look at each other. Sometimes the drummer would just hit, and then they would get it out.
They would mute it
Yeah, they
on
just
mix
mute it.
down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if there was a big space. But I don't recall playing with clicks for the entire time that we were...
When did clicks become... when did you
Well,
start
it's
using
interesting
clicks?
because we had a transition from, and this is an interesting thing, because we went to the point where Jeff Porcaro was programming drums.
Okay.
And you're going, why is he programming drums? He's brilliant. Because the music business moved away from the organic. And during that organic, clicks were part of the film industry. You had to have that to sync with film.
Yeah.
But that was the most ugly sounding thing I've ever heard, that click.
Yeah.
And so what we would do, and I know during the 80s when I was working with Rod Stewart, I had a JP8 that I had a guy devise a box that if I just held a chord, it would do 8th notes or 16th notes.
Okay.
So some of the songs, like Some Guys Have All the Luck, that was the click.
Okay.
Dun, 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 and the drummer played to it.
Right.
So, but as far as a sophisticated click, I don't think that, I'm trying to think, clicks became synonymous to me with programming stuff on computer. Now,
Yeah.
there were people playing to clicks. Here they do.
Yeah.
In a live session.
Yeah, but clicks back then,
No such thing.
no such thing.
No such thing.
Even on these Steely Dan records.
No such thing. No such thing. And the thing is that part of the discipline of being a musician back then is to take responsibility for the groove.
Yes.
And the drummer took responsibility for the groove. And sometimes there was a natural, just a little bit of a nice little speeding up at the right time. But for the most part, these cats were metronomes, man.
Yeah.
Jim Gordon, Jim Keltner, John Robinson, all these, Ed Green, all the cats, Jeff. They were metronomes.
Yeah.
And you learned to fit in with the style. Jim Keltner was a behind the beat guy. Mm-hmm. Steve Gadd was a boom, right on it. And so you learned to play. And that was part of the fun of it, is that, oh, I'm playing with Keltner, man. That means that thing's just going to, you're going to just float.
You know that, you think about that, right? When the session's going to start, you know what it's going to be about.
You just know you're going to float back. It's going to feel so dang good. And it was just, yeah, it was such a great time because of the combinations. There was one song called Stand by the Seawall, which never made it on a Steely Dan record, but I remember multiple tracking dates with different drummers, multiple. And I finally walked in, I guess it was a moment of humor. They didn't think it was funny. I said, which they never did. I said, guys, have you ever considered maybe I'm the problem? And I did it for a laugh, and I look at it, no, I don't think that's it. I'm going, okay, whatever. I couldn't even solicit a laugh.
Okay, so I want to play you Ricky Don't Lose That Number. What is this intro, first of all?
I don't know. I don't know what instrument that is.
Some weird marimba
Yeah,
or something.
it's a marimba. I think Victor might have.
Probably, right?
Probably played that.
Yeah.
Because that was early enough where you're not really dealing with a sophisticated synthesizer doing that. That's something different. Song for my father, man. Yep.
We hear you're leaving, that's okay. I thought our little wild time had just begun. I guess you kinda scared yourself, you turn and run.
And they would orchestrate it.
But if you have a change of heart, Ricky, don't lose that.
When you would fill in those areas, would Donald say, hey, you should fill in the spaces of the melody, or did you not even hear the melody? Did you know what the song was going to sound like when you're tracking it?
they had set him up in a.
So he was singing at the same time.
Yeah, otherwise
like a scratch
we have
vocal.
to have that. I mean, with this kind of stuff, you just can't do it in a vacuum. You've got to actually hear what's going on, so you're not stepping out. Because some of his stuff is so unpredictable.
Yes.
So there would always be an accommodation where he would be singing. And it was assumed. I mean, the reason why I think they hired me during that particular era was for whatever fills that I brought to the table. It seemed to fit the way their writing style was, because they would always call me or Paige, like on Black Friday.
Yeah.
I forgot if I played the clavinet or the Wurlitzer. One of us played one or the other. But I mean, that was kind of the whole thing. And after they got out of their band, it became very musician based. So each song, the characteristic of a certain bass player or a certain drummer, certain keyboard player or guitar player, were very important to them.
Now, would this be a one-take thing?
All I remember about them is that you would do a lot more rehearsing than you would recording.
Okay.
So it would be very typical that we would probably spend an hour to maybe 2 hours just working out what we're doing. The chart would be there,
Yep.
but it's just honing, and then we maybe do 2 or 3 takes, and that would be done.
And one of those takes would be the master take.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Would there ever be a punch-in?
We would do that. I mean,
Yeah.
when we get to, if you want to talk about Asia at some point, we had to punch in with Steve Gadd doing his maniacal craziness.
Yeah, we'll get to
Okay.
that. But this particular track, this is where I started realizing things about production, about studio players. I looked on the back of the albums and I saw your name there. And to me, I didn't realize that this is the highest charting Steely Dan song ever.
Yeah, I didn't know that till now.
This particular weird lick that goes into the chorus, though, is really unique. It's so memorable.
Oh yeah.
So when you saw that, did Donald Fagen say, "Oh, play this here"? Was it written down on the chart?
Well, I would have been at his house, and we would be putting the chart together, and he'd say, "This is the lick that takes us into the chorus."
Okay.
And so I wrote it out. That's what just kind of separates it. You go, dude. You go to the minor, and then you go to the major, and then you're up at the 6th, and the 7th, +9. You're back down to the 6th, and then 7th. I'm just like, whoa! And it's just the coolest chord.
Yes, it's so unique.
It doesn't sound good if you hit all the notes at one time. I can tell you that. It needs to be separated, but it gives you the flavor of what's taking you into the
What
chord.
would you call the style of playing, though, of your accompaniment here in the verse?
Almost country,
Right?
isn't it? Did I do that? Yeah,
I hear it more like a hymn.
almost. Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of that style.
it's like what Keith Jarrett, you
Yeah.
know, the influence of, but Keith called it country too. They
yeah,
have
it's a little
country-
bit of a country
Yeah.
flavor to it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think at a certain point Victor Feldman was so correct to move to, because they moved away from this style. Every single song that I played on in that Katy Lied or Pretzel Logic, that was kind of the mantra of the way I approached it. Obviously, there were certain things that weren't. And I don't even know why I did that, because I wasn't a country player, but that kind of felt right.
Well, I hear this in the jazz musicians that were related to Keith Jarrett, Charlie Hayden, and
Sure.
and Gary Burton, all the people that played in a lot of the ECM artists
Yep.
that from in the early '70s, Pat Metheny.
Yeah.
They all had this Midwestern
Yeah.
style that was incorporated into jazz.
I agree.
Right? And this is kind of what this is,
Yeah,
too.
I guess so. Yeah.
Right?
I guess you're right.
This
yeah.
is more of a pop version of that same thing. So let me just back up here and talk about this, getting into the chorus here.
Kinda scared yourself, you turn and run. But if you
Short minor.
Yep.
A.
Ricky, don't lose that number. You don't wanna call nobody else. Send it
That makes the whole thing.
to yourself.
And that's even a country kind of lick, isn't it?
Totally.
That guitar lick.
It's the only one you want.
And I like this where they delay it.
Feel better when you get home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It
got
is so country.
there's some country elements to it, which is really interesting.
Did you ever think of that back then?
Not at all, because I was in LA and I didn't know anything about country.
Yeah. Do you think that Donald would have even thought that?
You know, there's a uniqueness to their whole legacy that can't be followed by anybody else. There's something going on with them that's only them.
Right.
So I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain coming from their band record to this, and then to the next transition, and then the next transition. It's just an interesting.
When this
road.
was on the radio, this was a huge hit when I was growing up.
Yeah.
It was on the radio all the time. When you'd hear that, would you think, "Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember that."
Oh, yeah.
Would that be the first time that you'd hear the finished record is when it was on the radio, or would they send out things that you just would hear?
I mean, they probably sent us an album.
Okay.
And I probably listened to it, but it's always a thrill when you hear something that you've been part of on the radio. That was always a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
It was a real big deal.
And the fact that the piano is so prominent in this.
That's part of, I guess, you know what it is? Fagen's a brilliant piano player, and I never understood why. I think he said he had some kind of a panic condition.
About playing in the studio?
Something that prevented him from wanting to be in the group playing, but as soon as the group left, he felt more comfortable with putting overdubs on without the pressure of, because that's the one component that you have to have if you're going to do what we did, is you have to have a bit of, I don't know, skydiving attitude.
Right.
Like, I don't know what I'm about to get into.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready to deal with the anxiety that comes from it. And I can remember a couple of times just almost shaking while I'm playing. I'm going, please stay calm, because this is like very difficult what I'm about to do, and I don't want to blow it. And you don't want to overdub. You don't want to go back and punch in. You want it to be right the first time.
Right.
So, yeah. And
Now,
we all felt that.
Okay, would you go back? I've asked other people this, and they don't, and I get different answers from different people, even if they played on the same songs.
Sure.
Would you go back and listen to your takes after you did them, or would you listen on headphones and out in the live room, or would they say that's good and you would just not even listen to it?
No, everybody, you want to come in and
Everybody
hear.
would come in and
Oh,
listen.
heck yeah. You want
And
to hear
what would people's reactions like when that track played? What did people think of it?
We loved it.
Okay. And
then
what would Donald and Walter, would they just sit there and not say anything?
Well, you know, Walter was like this. And he'd go, that's good. That's good. I think that's good. And that'd be it. Yeah. You guys want to go for coffee? No. You guys want to go to lunch? No. We're you guys want to do anything? No. Don't get me wrong. If you're listening, Donald, I loved every minute of it. It was great.
3 years later, this is 74 this came out. I think it was recorded in 73. 3 years later is the Asia record, and you played on the track Asia. It's the only track you played on.
It's the only track
record.
I played on, yeah.
Okay, but that song has really withstood the test of time.
Yeah.
And there's some really unique things about it.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that song.
Well, we discussed this as the fact it's the only song that I can remember of theirs where actually there's only about 1/3 of the song has a vocal on it.
Right.
And all the rest is instrumental, and I felt like when they did this, I'm not sure where it fits in the order of the way they wrote the songs for the album Asia. They gave it the title for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like they were going, okay, we want to go beyond where we've been. Mm-hmm. So let's throw some chord combinations together in a song. And some of it seems very haphazard to me. It's like very arbitrary. And let's see what works. Let's see what doesn't work. Let's find the way a certain combination of chords, and let's find a way to tie it together with a lead line or something like that. And I felt like it was almost like an experimental kind of a track for the future. And it's interesting because a lot of people come up, oh man, I love Asia, I love Asia, I love Asia. And it's funny because my wife, when she hears it, she goes, where are the vocals? What happened to the vocals? I said, it's not that kind of a song, honey. I said, it's vocals and it takes off to all these kinds of, so I like the stuff where they're doing more singing. It's unique. And that I feel like it's a transition. And it was kind of like, Omar, we love what you've done, but we're moving on.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's okay with me. And because Victor Feldman is the bomb. And so they went on to do Peg and just so many good, Hey 19, all these great songs. And then, of course, they embarked on the Wendell, the drum machine. And I'm going, okay, here we're going. Now we're going away from... I played on the Night Fly.
Right.
And I thought that was basically a Steely Dan record,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
and that was great. I mean, there's some great stuff on the Night Flight, just unbelievable. But that was kind of like between that and Asia, I think it was casting the die for the next major era for these guys.
Yeah.
It's amazing because I listen to certain radio stations and they play this stuff all the time. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason why it coexists with British tunes and Latin tunes, all the different kinds of things. It fits with it. I did a thing. I did a panel at Middle Tennessee University here, and someone raised their hand. Mr. Omartian, I have a question. Yes, sir. I don't like Steely Dan.
Did you say, what's your question?
I said, yeah, so what's the question? He said, I don't like Steely Dan. I said, okay, it's fine. You don't like Steely Dan. And it's so funny. But it's a kind of a thing where it can be, to me, it can be appreciated even though it's very progressive.
Okay, I want to play, I want to start that out.
Country.
Yeah.
Up on the hill, people never stand. They just don't care. Chinese music under banyan tree. Here at the above the sea. Asia.
Beautiful.
And all my time dancing is through.
Harmonizing. Yeah.
I run to
Right here.
you.
Okay.
That's where I say, man, where do those, that, you're going, dude. I mean, it's and it works, and you
It
go,
works.
why? Wow, it's like
Beautiful.
Yes, it's fantastic, and no, I mean, that's pop music, but it isn't pop music.
Right.
And it's kind of like the way they served it was in the middle of all this other stuff going on, and it goes to the. It gets very normal. It gets very normal, and then all of a sudden you got coming out of it. It's kind of like there's a cool passage, and I loved it because of this one piano thing. It goes like all that's kind of squashed,
Now, were those written out voicings?
and then this.
Right.
And I'm going, what the heck is that? Against the E.
Yeah.
And it's those kind of little funky things that where you're going, what is that? And then, of course, the finale, which we'll get to.
I was thinking about this, kind of where Gad comes in with a straight beat here.
Yep.
And then,
Chinese music under banyan tree.
okay, so for once and for all, is this one take or two takes? I already asked you this, but
I want to say two. And the reason I want to say two is that we probably played very similar stuff. I think I wouldn't change too much. Nobody would change too much. You'd settle on a part. We probably worked on this for 2 hours before we actually ran tape.
with the rhythm sections, you guys would be sitting in a room. How far apart would you be?
If it was producer's workshop, it was a small room. I would say that we were
Small
very
this size, would you say?
smaller,
Smaller, okay.
half the size of this room.
Okay.
And so they would baffle Larry's guitar, if I'm not mistaken. It would be baffled in some kind of foam.
Yep.
Chuck would go direct. Gad would be there, and they'd have a big thing over the piano, kind of a, what do you call it? It's like a leather thing or whatever it's called, with the piano closed.
Piano closed?
It would have been closed.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Otherwise, there would have been such bleeding, it would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I have to try to remember if it was Producer's Workshop, because we've been in places with them where the drum was in a booth. Producer's Workshop didn't have a drum booth. So we would have been in the room together.
You could see everybody, though.
Oh, yeah, eye contact.
So you're looking at everybody.
I remember I was here and Gad was right there.
Let's move ahead in the song. I want to talk about the drum breaks.
Here's this weird part.
When he starts playing that wasn't a typical thing to have a drum solo in the middle of a song, or I guess a drum and sax break, right? And this is anything but typical. What were you thinking when you heard this, or what do you think when you hear this now?
When dude starts playing, you go, "What the heck?" I mean, you're just watching him and you're going.
Had
Yikes.
you worked with him, Steve Gadd, at that point? Or
That was
no?
the first time I worked with him.
Okay.
I worked with him after that. He was coming out from New York. Where
I
was
think
he?
so, yeah.
New York. He was coming
Yeah.
out from New York. That was the first time I worked with him.
And did you have any
Nice
idea?
guy.
Oh, great guy.
I love. He was just the coolest dude, man. And I knew that he played on Simon and Garfunkel's, 50 Ways to Lose Your Lover, and that little military thing was just like, whoa. I mean, you could just tell this guy's brilliant. And that was just the precursor to the big one at the end, which was like, whoa. And so it was kind of like, you're used to being around great drummers. They're very seldom asked to exercise this part of them.
Yeah,
they have to always stay
pop
controlled.
record, right.
Yeah, stay controlled and stuff like that. So you don't get really the full gamut of what you're.
Now, would they say to him, "Hey, this is what I want you to just go crazy," or what did they say?
I have no idea, but it wouldn't be very effusive. It'd be like, just do some fills. That would be it. They wouldn't say go crazy.
Okay.
That's not like
now,
that.
Now, would you go back in and listen when you got the final take of this and say,
We say, what the heck? I mean, because at the end, it gets, he just goes.
okay, all the parts before that section even come in are so tight.
Yeah.
This is so tight. How?
No clicks.
No clicks.
You just
And
felt
then-
it.
Chuck and Steve are so together. The bass and the kick drum are so tight.
Well, you know, being a player, that after you've run something with somebody else, you feel the way that they feel something. So everybody's kind of feeling the way everybody adjusts to time.
Mm-hmm.
And because of how good you are, it doesn't take very long for you to figure out this is where the guy puts the backbeat. This is where, and a 4/4 bar that's just open.
Yeah.
Everybody's right there. When
And
it's done.
and you'd already rehearsed the songs, so you kind of knew the sections, right?
I would say that we rehearsed for 2 hours.
Okay,
at
so
least,
would
I'd
you say you had the song pretty memorized at
Yeah,
that point?
because there's time signature changes that just suddenly appear, and those are the kind of things. Your Gold Teeth was the same thing, 3/8, 6/8, back and forth and stuff. At a certain point, you got to get beyond looking at the time signature. You got to get beyond. You got to feel it. It's in you. And at a certain point, it was kind of like everybody kind of knew where the downbeat was going to be and stuff like that. So it was just a matter of getting familiar with each other, and that was part of playing 3 sessions a day or whatever. You just got used to, you know, you were in it.
So you talked about the solo later on that he plays.
Yep.
And obviously, hearing Wayne play on it, you heard when the record was done,
We're
right?
done, yeah. All we heard was the 4-piece
Okay.
when we left. Then we go back to the top, and finally a vocal shows up.
Up on the hill, they think I'm okay, or so they say.
That's Victor.
And would that have been done later on
Later.
as an overdub? So good. Your time
Thank you.
so good.
Music always sets me free. Angular banjos sound good to me.
I like that lyric.
Yeah.
Asian, when
Beautiful.
all my time dancing is
I love the harmonizing right there that you did.
That's what, well, that, then he gets going.
How did you keep playing?
We didn't. I had to go back, and I literally had to go back a few times and get the, you know,
Okay.
I'm going. You know, because he's right here, and I'm watching his arms just flying all over the place, and Carlton is just like this, and we're just like, what the heck? I mean, he didn't show off like that on the run-throughs.
Okay.
He didn't show off like that. No.
So it was completely unexpected.
Well, it wasn't totally unexpected, but where he went was like, whoa, that the rolls between the bass drum.
Yes.
Man, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
It was pretty incredible. And you notice, which is interesting, and one of the things that I always liked about Fagan is that you noticed how much of the piano melody goes with his
yes.
high on a hill. I'm playing there.
Yes.
Da, 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 da.
Yes.
Da, 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 da. And then, you know, he likes that thing going along with his vocal with support.
Yeah.
I think part of it too is that I wouldn't consider him to be, he's kind of a stylist.
Stylist.
vocalist.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think you make accommodations for the way you write when you don't have that incredible voice. So you do certain things. And I think that's part of why this works so well too, because of his limitations.
Right. That the piano was really supportive for his singing.
And I think, to me, the way I always look at stuff, it's the limitations that make the artist. It's not the capabilities. It's just the little limitations that go, that they're operating at the absolute edge. And it's just very cool.
One of the people that I interviewed, Christopher Cross, you produced his first record that was a smash hit. Mm-hmm. He told me the story about how you got the gig.
Yeah.
And it was through your relationship with Larry Carlton.
Yep.
I want to hear it from you, the story.
Well, we had a A&R department at Warner Brothers. I was a staff producer at Warner Brothers, a new one.
Yeah.
New staff producer. And I was one of maybe 12.
Okay.
And you had everyone from Ted Templeman to Russ Titleman and all these, these Lenny Warnocker, these guys produced everybody. So anyway, Wednesday morning we would have what we'd call our A&R listening meeting. So for about 2 hours, cassettes would come in or whatever would come in, and So they put in a Christopher Cross cassette. First time I've heard it.
Yep.
They've been listening to him for a couple of years.
Okay.
He keeps saying stuff. Sailing, Ride Like the Wind. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at everybody and they're just... And I'm thinking to myself, this stuff sounds really good. So I opened my mouth. I said, guys, I like this. Lenny looks at me and said, you like it? I said, yeah. He says, well, you do it. That's the way it was. You like it, you do it. I said, okay. So Lenny's secretary set up a meeting for Chris to come in and all kinds of stuff. So he's thinking he's meeting Lenny or Teddy or whatever. So they escort him into my office. He sits down and I'm talking to him and I'm going, this is really weird. I'm not getting any vibe here. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling him about, hey, let's do a record, da-da-da. He's got a band. He's got a band, three other guys.
Yep.
Really good. He leaves. I went, what just happened? I said, this is the weirdest thing. So anyway, he comes back in and he said, I found out that you played on Steely Dan records. I said, yeah. He says, do you know Larry Carlton? I said, yeah, I know Larry Carlton. He said, do you think you could get him to play on the record? I said, yeah. And then he said, well, you can
So
do
that's
that.
literally
You're my
that.
producer. You're my producer. That's it. But I understand. I mean, Warner Brothers was this to him. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Look at the names of the people at Warner Brothers. I could have this producer, that producer stuff. And who's this Yutz? So anyway, so we went in. And actually very much against the grain. I mean, if you think about what was going on at that time,
Yes.
It was Blondie, it was the Cars, it was punk, it was all this kind of stuff. And we're making this very pop record. Strings. What, strings? Nobody uses strings. Horns? No, nobody uses horns and stuff like that. And so we went ahead and we did this. And I remember we finished. It took a while. We got it done. And I remember the head of promotion calling me in my office. He said, well, we've decided to delay the release. And I went, oh. And when you hear that word, delay the release, you go, they don't believe in this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did Chris get into how this took off? Did he get into any specifics in Miami?
Yeah, talk about that.
Okay, so they decided to release Ride Like the Wind, just release it, and a DJ in Miami heard it. And the calls started coming in from the Hispanic community like you couldn't believe. They were calling in and go, I love that Ride Like the Wind, man. You know, this whole thing, this whole subculture. And it was very typical back then that a DJ or a couple of DJs could literally break a record nationwide because they believed in it. It's not like that anymore. It's corporate.
Right.
And that's how it took off. And Russ Thyret, who was the head of promotion, called me when the record became a bona fide hit. He said, I just want to make it clear to you, don't give us any credit. He said, no, he said, we didn't know what we had.
Okay.
Because of what was going on, he said, but don't thank us. He said, it just took off. So it just took off. And then I remember it just couldn't be stopped. It was just amazing how it went across the country. And I think somehow, sometimes when there's been a steady diet of something new comes in, and it just happens to be the thing that people go, oh, this is fresh. I'm so used to hearing this.
Yeah.
And it struck a nerve. And then I'll never forget, we're down in our Wednesday meeting, and Mo Austin, who was the president of Warner Bros., comes down. We're talking about the next single for Christopher Cross. What do you guys think? So we're suggesting, he says, well, we were thinking about Sailing, and every one of us, and I have to tell you a story that's even funnier than this. Every one of us said, no, that's not your second single. And he said, well, F you, we're putting it out anyway. So they did, and of course, that was it. I remember when Mo came down with What a Fool Believes, and Teddy Templeman's sitting there. And he's in the meeting. He says, we're thinking about the first Doobie Brothers single from the album being "What a Fool Believes," and everyone says, "That's not a hit." Every one of us goes, "That's not," because it doesn't sound like the Doobie Brothers.
Right.
Anyway, so shows you what we know. But anyway, the Christopher Cross thing was really something, and I really enjoyed working with him. And I saw your thing about the guitar thing, and I have no answer for why.
Okay, so
I have no answer. I don't know why. I think it was a matter of we're mixing. There's things that are vying for space.
Yeah.
My read on Chris was he was an exceptional guitar player that didn't have a whole lot of self-confidence.
That's what he
in his
said
playing.
about himself, too.
So to him, I'm going, man, what a solo.
Yeah.
And to him, he said, let's just keep it kind of as part of the thing. And in retrospect, there wouldn't have been anything cooler than to just jack that thing up and just have it, burn your brain.
Now, there's the SNL skit with Michael McDonald,
Yeah.
where he was singing on everything at that point.
Yeah, of course he was, yeah.
How did he get on that? Now, did he stop by the studio or something, or they were in the same studio?
We used to work in multiple room studios all the time.
Okay.
There were a lot of multiple room studios, and it was very typical where McDonald might be working in the next room. He'll come over, hey Omar, hey guys, blah blah blah, and we would work at Amigo, and Randy Newman would be in the next studio. He'd come over and he would crack us up. I mean, it was just great. I knew Mike, and he was one of a few people that I reached out to. Said, would you want to? He said, sure, let's do it. So, I'm not taking credit for everything, but because I had been around for a while, it made sense for me to be the one to ask someone to.
I think Christopher said that he had already sung those lines, and then you just had Michael.
And then we sat there and went, you know what, man? It would be cool if McDonald sang that.
Yeah.
It's such a long way to go. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And he did. And I think he sang on a couple other things, I believe. I think there was another one or two things that he did on that record.
But
too.
Larry, though, played on a couple of the couple of the tracks.
Sure did.
I believe those were right at the end of the record, right?
Yeah. That record took us a little while.
Okay.
We were working with his band. Chris was kind of getting into that mode early on. I could tell that he was very enamored with the studio player thing.
Okay.
And it was right away.
Yeah.
And so I felt kind of badly because I felt he was talking about, he didn't say I wish there was another drummer, but he was getting frustrated because he knew that we could get tracks a lot quicker. Tommy Taylor, who played drums, is fantastic. But these are band guys, and for Tommy, he was used to just being in Chris's band, and so it would be easier for him to say, nah, do this, do that, or do that. And so what happened was, believe it or not, Ride Like the Wind, the bass drum pattern was boom, 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 ba-da, boom, 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 and it didn't. I'm going, this doesn't drive. And so I thought, we're in the disco era.
Right.
What if we put 4 on the floor? And man, because we tried for 3 days. We were cutting Ride Like the Wind for 3 days, and seriously, 3 days. And it was great, but something was missing, and we couldn't put our finger on it. And it was that boom, 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 boom.
Let me actually play the track here.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
I
fascinating.
mean, we went through days of messing around with that song, and we knew that it was kind of a Hitly thing, but we just couldn't get our head around what was going on.
Okay.
And it wasn't him, it was the drum pattern. And we had... That's that 4 on the floor, man.
It's works so well. Oh my God.
It was necessary.
When I hear you play as the pattern there in the verse, da 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 da, to me it's so obviously played by a pro studio player because it's so precise.
Yeah.
In the days now of Pro Tools and things like that, and me having been a record producer,
Yes.
that the cutoffs of notes are so important. That's the thing that people, they always think about, well, where does it lie in the beat? Is it grooving? Is it on top of the beat? Is it behind? It's like, yeah. Also, when you have a sustained note, where does it cut off? Because that adds to the groove as well.
Exactly, yeah.
To me, when I hear that, I hear those perfectly spaced the cutoffs on
Thank
those.
you. Yeah, and that again, it's not artificially done. And then I put Rhodes on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Chris, I mean, his playing was just, I mean, he's so good. He's got all those skills.
Yeah.
But he just lacked a little bit of confidence. But he gained it as he got more confident with what he was doing. But I agree, and it's interesting if you think about taking that four on the floor out and go back to boom, chop, boom, 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 boom. It just doesn't have the steam.
No,
the steam is gone, and it took. I mean, it was so weird because you kind of think, well, we should be able to come to the conclusion faster than that. But there was something in my mind, disco bad. We don't want four. And all of a sudden we went, no. We got to be open to that pulse. And it just...
So after 3 days...
3 days.
So who said, did you say try four on the floor?
I want to say I took credit for that. And I think I did, but I'm not 100% sure. But someone had to speak up something. And I think I just said, maybe Tommy said it. I'm not sure if he did or not.
I'm not going to belabor this about the guitar solo or anything, but I would be remiss if I didn't.
Yeah.
Now that I have you here.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that should be up. That should be up.
I read the comments in the when I made that video. I usually in the first couple hours I'll read the comments, and some people would say, well, they did it on purpose to get on radio, and pop radio at the time was,
I don't agree. I don't agree
they
with
did it
that.
on purpose? That's at the end of the song.
No, I don't agree with that. That would be totally fitting. And you know what? We're entering into the 80s, which would be the era of keyboard, synth, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe that played into it, but I doubt it. Because if you listen to the rest of the record, there's some pretty upfront guitar stuff going on.
Absolutely. I mean, Larry's solos are plenty loud.
Eric Johnson.
Eric Johnson.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the first time I ever heard Eric Johnson was on that record.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about arrangements. So you did the arrangements, the orchestral arrangements,
Yes,
right?
sir, yes.
The beginning of Sailing. Okay. That was an accident. Now, Chris told me that. How did that happen again?
Chet was mixing, and he pushed play on the two machines, and for some reason, machine one fired, or machine two fired, and machine one didn't, and the strings were on machine two, but it had to be at a different place in where the tape is, because that doesn't come in until the first chorus. So I don't know why it fired at the beginning when he was at the start. It was meant to be whatever it was.
Right.
Because we didn't think about it.
Right.
I wasn't in the room when they did this.
Okay.
So when I walked in, Chet said, check this out, see what you think. And I went, whoa, I didn't even think about that. Because that's the middle of the chorus.
Right.
That comes in, say, it should be, where you like, say, be aware. And then, that's where that part comes in. So I don't know how that fired at the beginning when it actually doesn't appear until at least a minute or more into the tape. So something happened where it was that was it.
This is a beautiful, the voicings and the way and the line writing of this is.
Because you have E's against D's
Yes.
and all kinds of E triads against, and then you got the flat five.
Yeah, those spacings of those.
Yeah. I don't even remember what I did. So
Yes.
I forgot how I started it, but it's that you've got the E open fifth. You got the E, A, E, but you got the G sharp.
Yes.
That little conflict.
Yes, with the that 5/9 interval in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I know that he had originally wanted, I think, Randy Newman to do the strings, and we couldn't get Randy. But I've been doing strings forever, so it wasn't like I hope it wasn't a fall off. I mean, I love Randy Newman; he's fantastic. But I enjoyed doing the strings, and I enjoyed doing it on Ride Like the Wind. That was kind of fun. It was like spaghetti western stuff.
At this point, this was record of the year. This was a massively big record.
Yeah, we didn't.
Could not
we
have
didn't
had a bigger
expect
record.
it. Yeah.
How did your life change then as a producer?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing what it's like anything. I mean that. I got calls from Rod Stewart, Donna Summer. I got calls and calls and calls from people about producing, and I'm very thankful to Chris that he allowed me to do this because it really opened the door for a lot of different things. And even the subsequent album, it's interesting because I have my theories about what happens with an artist who's been writing songs for 10 years, and then you put their best songs on the first album, and then all of a sudden he's on the road and he's got to come up with another record. And a lot of times the disappointment of a second record is almost predestined because you've spent all this time preparing for record one.
Yeah, spend your whole life preparing for record one.
And Arthur's theme, which was, I had to crack up because I have Lukather in the room and we're doing Once You Get Caught Between and there's Lukather, this rock and roller, and he's sitting in the thing. You got Porcaro, you got Mike Porcaro, and I'm laughing because I'm going, they're playing this mild-mannered stuff, and I'm thinking about Lukather, and I just laugh because he's such a crazy rock man. I love him. He's the best. It's interesting because that was a song that came after we were finished with record two.
Okay.
And it's funny because I remember it was a Warner Brothers movie, so they were showcasing it on the lot, and they wanted to do a theme for the end title. For some reason during that era, I was on a lot of end titles, Karate Kid and all this kind of stuff. We went and saw the movie, Chris and I, over at the Warner lot, and we couldn't stop laughing. So he got Burt Bacharach and Carol Baertsegger and Paul Allen. I think Paul was the one that came down in the plane and he said, once you get caught between the moon and New York City, he was flying into New York and he called Chris, he said, I got an idea for a song for this end title. And then they wrote the song. And we went and did it, and it turned out to be the salvation for album two.
Was it normal for Warner Brothers movies to reach out to the Warner Brothers artists?
I would say so. I mean, I remember on Ghostbusters, when I was in the studio with Rod, they called him and asked if he would do an end title, but don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but the director wanted it to sound like I Wanted a Drug. He specifically, that's why when Ray Parker did dum da da dum 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 dum, it sounds like I Wanted a Drug, and he got sued, and they paid the $3 or $4 million to Huey Lewis, and still made millions.
Right.
But I remember Rod said, no, mate, I'm not copying anybody's records. I remember that specifically. But yeah, you would get you'd get reach outs. They would reach out to you and say, look, we're looking for an end title, and that was a popular thing back then in the '80s. Mm-hmm. End titles that were kind of things. Yeah, like the Carly song I played on that Nobody Does It Better. That was really in vogue to have a pop song associated with a movie. Interesting decade. Really interesting decade.
So I talked about this next song here that you produced. It's a Peter Cetera,
right.
Next Time I Fall, with Amy Grant.
Yeah.
This is really the first time that I had ever heard of Amy Grant.
Yeah.
But I talked about this song for a particular reason. What would be the strings have been?
Probably a DX1. Oh.
Like a road that never ends, how it leads
I love all the counter melodies that
Yeah.
happen in there. They're really beautiful. Are you playing all those
Yeah.
things, all those keyboard
Yeah.
parts?
Yeah.
What was the idea in getting Amy Grant? How did that
Well,
come
what
about?
happened was that Peter really wanted it to be a duet.
Okay.
He had it really fixed in his mind. He wanted to do the song, but he wanted to do a duet, and he was calling different co-singers, but they were all on. Everybody was on the road. Everybody was doing stuff, and it was really kind of. And we had to get it done.
Right.
So Amy, I've known for years because I worked on some of her when she was doing a Christian artist here in Nashville. And I just thought, well, okay, let me think about this. And I heard it in my head, and I thought, well, I think she might really be good. So I said, Peter, may I make a suggestion? He said, yeah. I said, how about Amy Grant? He said, who's Amy Grant? I said, well, she's a Christian artist, but she's huge. And he says, well, I want to make sure that, there's an audience for her. Well, she was playing at the Forum for 2 nights.
Uh-huh.
And it was sold out both nights. I said, if I got you tickets to one of her concerts, would you go? He said, yeah. I said, because she's going to be here in a couple days at the Forum.
Did he say the Forum? What?
He said, the Forum? I said, yeah, the Forum. So he goes, and the place is 22,000 people, 2 nights in a row.
Yeah.
And he called me, he says, that's my co-singer. So she came out. I mean, she was there, but she went back. We decided on a key. She came back, and she was very nervous. I mean, she was really nervous. I mean, it was a big deal. This is Bobby Caldwell too, and Bobby is such a good writer. So I think he passed away last year. But anyway, so she came and sang it. We did the vocal in the evening. We got both parts, and it ended up on his record. It ended up being a hit, like the Glory of Love, which was David Foster wrote the song with Peter. So he had 2 big hits, and I'll never forget. I forgot how many million records we sold. And so I'd gotten a call from Barbra Streisand to do one of her albums. I said I had to turn her down because I was about to start the second Peter Cetera record. So I get a call 2 weeks before we start the Peter Cetera record. Can I talk to you? I said, yeah, I'm over at this studio called Lighthouse. He says, Mike, he says, I think I need to move on to another producer. I said, oh, okay. He says, I don't think we've had enough success together. And I love Peter. Don't get me wrong, I love him. We'd go see Cub games together and stuff like that. But it was just so funny. It was like this. It's just, I sat there and went, huh? Why? So, and he ended up with Pat Leonard, who's no slouch. I mean, that guy's really good.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is please don't use that. Of all the excuses, just say, hey, I'd like to move on to somebody else. Don't tell me we didn't have enough success together. So anyway.
I've wanted to interview you. You and I have been talking for the last year or so.
Yeah, it's been great.
And I'm so glad that it happened. And it's such an honor to meet you and hear you play in person
too, my
here.
friend.
And you're on all these fantastic records.
I've been blessed.
And thank you so much for
I've
all
been
the
blessed
great
to be
music.
able to talk to you too, man. And, blessings on you, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd like to once again thank Michael for being my guest today. Don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.